The RTX 2080 Super and a great value GPU are not two phrases I suspect anybody has ever thought they would hear in the same sentence. In this video, I am going to show you that in 2023, the 2080 Super is one of the best value graphics cards you can buy on the used market for mid-level 1440p gaming and upper level and high-end 1080p gaming. So let's go over the test bench. Now, this test bench is different than the older test benches I had. I went to an open air frame, benchable open air. I released a video on it. It's incredible. Along with a new motherboard and a new CPU. So I'm running a 3900X paired with an Asus X570 Maximus Hero. It's similar to the Dark Hero, so it's a pretty good quality motherboard. And then it's paired with 16 gigs of CL16 3400 megahertz RAM, and it's got two SSDs, a 500 gig for games, and a 256 for the hard drive and for the OS. So it's pretty standard. I would say it's a pretty solid mid-range system as far as AMD goes. And the cooler is a stock Ryzen cooler, which I do need to upgrade to something better, and I will. So, with this being the first of a new round of gaming benchmarks to determine the gaming value of all sorts of graphics cards, which I'm going to be testing. I'm really excited to get this done. I'm going to be doing a different kind of benchmarking suite. I'm not going to be just showing you charts of all of the different games compared to other graphics cards. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run the benchmarks, and I'm going to show you the beginning and the end of the benchmark, and I'm going to give you my thoughts. And I'm also going to show you the settings. So we're going to show you the settings, and then we're going to show you like a second of the benchmark, and then we're going to show you the final result of the benchmark. I will be testing Overwatch 2 to represent the low-end esports style game that does a good representation of your Counter-Strikes, your Apex, your Fortnites, etc. I have a pretty cool benchmark that somebody made from in-game settings to test out, and I've been playing around with it, and it's really good. The next game I will be running is Call of Duty to represent your high-end multiplayer FPS game. And then I will be testing Cyberpunk 77 to represent your upper-end single-player AAA gaming experience. So let's start with Cyberpunk 77, one of the most demanding AAA games known to man, our generation's Crisis. So I started with ray tracing on low and DLSS on quality, which is the highest settings you can get for DLSS upscaling. And I got a smooth, crisp 59.25 frames per second. The lows were a little bit low, but as for a single player game, that's more than doable. Now I decided to go to high settings, take ray tracing off, and then I wanted to use the highest level DLSS again to see how it would look. We got about 75 FPS, so we gained about 25% improvement, give or take. So that's pretty solid. Again, more than playable. So let's try one more. So what I did for this last one was I went to high ultra performance, which is the lowest upscaling you can get. It takes, I think, a 720p image. And I put it on medium settings, and I wanted to see what we would get. Now I just want to preface that for a game like Cyberpunk, I feel like 30 frames per second is playable because it's a single player game. So the 88 frames per second we get is great. So the 2080 Super is more than capable. So let's move on to Overwatch. This is a simple benchmark. I'm at 1440p on ultra settings. I really didn't feel like the need to show you my settings. And basically the way this benchmark works is it just tries to get as much going on in the frame as possible to test the GPU to its limit. And as you can see, I'm going between 110 frames per second on the lows to 160 on the highs. I would more than max out your typical 1440p monitor, which basically means that the 2080 Super will max out any esports title in 1440, probably with ray tracing on, so it's more than enough. So I wanted to start out with balanced settings, and I wanted to get DLSS to be the highest end DLSS. So I felt like it was a good mix of average settings and high-end DLSS. And I wanted just to show you my settings here. I do feel that Call of Duty is important to get at least 80 to 90 frames per second in order to have a good multiplayer experience. So I would not recommend a GPU that scores any less. So let's benchmark it. As you see, we got 102 frames per second with the highest DLSS in balanced settings, and I thought that was a very good indicator, and I play on a 4090 at that kind of frames. So again, it's something that I was very happy with. And if you take a look at the 3070 using these same settings, as you can see, you'll find there's only 10 frames per second difference, which is huge. So now we're going to move on to I'm going to drop it to ultra performance, performance, and then I'm going to run the benchmark, and that's a lower render of DLSS, and you get 120 frames per second, which is great. Now keep in mind we're playing this on 1440p. So I started this video by saying the RTX 2080 Super was a fantastic value proposition for gaming. I used the benchmarks to back up my theory, and now we're going to get to what you guys all want to know. How expensive is this thing? Well, if we go on eBay and we look at 2070 or 2080 Supers that have sold in the last 2 weeks, you can see that they're going for anywhere from about $195 to about $220, give or take. So if you can get one of these at around $200, doesn't matter which model because I assume they're all the same. It's like you see this blower for $192 and MSI Super Ventures for $188. If you can get these for $200, I would argue that the 2080 Super in the current market is a better buy than the RTX 3070. If you look at the 3070, you're looking at anywhere from, I want to say, $320 to $300. So you're looking at a $100 difference for 10 to 15 frames per second. And when you are in the lower tier of graphics cards, when you're at the lower tier of the budget, every dollar counts. The difference between spending $310, well, don't buy Zotac ever. Ever, never, don't buy Zotac. But let's say spending $325 on a Founders versus, let's do $209 on 2080 Strix, or 2080 Super Strix, which is actually theoretically the top of the AIB ladder. You're looking at about $111. Now, for $111, you are well on your way to buying a used Ryzen 5600X CPU, which is actually faster than that 3900 that that's in my test bench by probably about 10%, which will give you a little bit of a bump in 1080p on some games, and even in 1440 in some games that are more CPU heavy. So I mean, that's a big difference. If you can basically get the same performance and get a CPU in addition, that's a huge deal in the budget space. So in conclusion, the in-game data that I've gathered, along with the current price trendings of the 2080 Super, suggest, in my opinion, and remember this is my opinion, and I feel like I have the sufficient facts to back it up. At the end of the day, it is still my opinion. I feel that the 2080 Super is one of the best value propositions in May 2023, and I would recommend, if anybody were to ask me what kind of GPU would you buy with a budget of $200 to get the best performance, I would probably tell them to go look for a 2080 Super. So thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe. I plan on doing a lot of GPU videos, and I think I will do a used GPU tier list sometime in the future when I have enough of these videos filmed. Alright guys, thanks again. Please like and subscribe.